to bring on a partner, the answer is to acqui-hire or acquire. When does that figure into kind of your decision tree, and when have you been able to leverage that decision?
The reality is that entrepreneurship is really difficult, and and yes, we were successful in Sharpen, and it's grown really, really fast, and it's a great story. And you have to go in with eyes wide open, particularly if you're a leader of a division or a business. Because of those challenges, when we've always looked at it, we've always put M&A first. Particularly where typically you have a brand and there's a brand halo you can provide a particular company, you've got scale and distribution. And that's where you do M&A. However, if there's a brand reputation, you've got a very vulnerable, very prestigious brand, and you believe there's some brand risk, that's a great candidate for an internal entrepreneurship. Another candidate is when you need the capability to be diffused across the organization really quickly. So for us, it was really clear that folks were consuming content very, very differently. We're all consuming. It's not a Gen Z thing or generational thing. We're all consuming content very differently. So we knew the tech stack that we had to build from scratch had to be diffused very quickly across the organization. And so when we were having meetings with our board and our fellow executives, when we said, okay, these are the reasons why we, in this case for Sharpen, we won't do M&A. But typically we'll firstly do M&A first, and we have been acquisitive. And it is one of those factors that you have to think really deeply before deciding whether to do something in-house or pursuing M&A.
That makes total sense. Amazing. I wanted to open it up to questions from the audience. You can ask the question, can I get a free subscription to Sharpen? I'll let Justin answer that.
I do say it's a free app. There obviously is a paid version, but I do encourage you to download the app. It's on the iOS store, Android store. Pick something that you're interested in. I mean, I'm doing the American history learning because I have to do the citizenship test pretty soon. So I've got to learn the basics, and I'm not doing particularly well. But I definitely encourage you to do that, because particularly when you think about learning in the future, and you think many of you brand and marketing, there's lots of people within the organization that really have to grasp the positioning that you are trying to communicate, not only to customers, but to people internally. And so more and more so we see that trend happening. Not only, obviously Sharpen is one example in higher ed, but we're seeing it more broadly in the learning space, moving into the sales organization and the marketing organization as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, not only are you part of the C-suite, you're also a client. You're also a user, so that's great. Go ahead.
So I just applied to become American citizen. So is that like
Yes, you've got to help me. Please help me.
forget the slightly offbeat question, but so I've been at companies that have been acquired, and I've also been on leadership teams that have made decisions on acquisitions. And I've actually found that M&A is really hard to do well. So I mean, you've seen it in entrepreneurship, you've seen M&A. What's been this, what stories can you tell around making M&A successful?
It's a really good question, because we've had deals that have not been great. And they've not been great because we haven't set it up well, and we haven't thought about it up front. Thesis, who are the people that are going to drive it? And then you have channel conflict. And then practically internally, people don't necessarily want to work on this thing that's new. Why should we help them? That's not going to help me. And what we have learned, and what we've learned from some hard learnings over the years, is one, to be extremely clear upfront in the diligence process exactly what marketing channels and sales channels you're going to be complementary on. So the folks that are internal into your company are very clear, this is what's going to happen. There's no negotiation. This is what's going to happen. This is why we're doing the deal. Second thing is the clarity of incentives and transparency. We always say that, particularly in transformation, the only job is creating transparency and removing friction. And a lot of times where we've gone wrong is where we haven't provided the transparency of the outcomes. So people like to say things are going well, everything's green light, this M&A is going well, and then 8 months later, nothing's happened. Behind the scenes, no one likes each other. They don't want it to work with each other, and then you're stuck with a rotten apple. So it's a lot about doing that work up front, getting the incentives right, and just creating lots and lots of transparency, particularly over that first year. And that's really, really helped us, particularly when the core thesis is typically you're trying to bring scale to a company, distribution, and a brand halo.
Yeah. Do you bring in like teachers and schools and building these products? Because technology is a weird thing, right?
Absolutely.
Kids right now, it's like the anxious generation book. It's like, don't let them touch a phone. But like this seems like something that makes a lot of sense. And if it can make them learn better, like leaning into the positive side of technology versus sort of the negative.
It's such a great question because we are a teacher company first. We work for teachers. And what that means is that we always are talking to teachers, and that is our customer. And in a sector like education, there's so many different stakeholders, and it's really easy to be confused. Is our customer the district? Is it the teacher? Is it the student? Is it the government? Is it some corporate? It's the teacher in our core business, and we really focus on the teacher for our majority of our products. At the same time, for something like Sharpen, we had to go over the inertia where we had a bit of arrogance in our company, where the marketing said, we know education, we know the teachers, of course we know how to do this. Students are just there, and they're in the classroom, they know how to do it. And so we had to really make a concerted effort to say, okay, we have a whole suite that's for teachers, our marketing work is for teachers, and we have segments, of course, around that. But something like Sharpen, we're actually not going to talk to teachers. All we're going to do is talk to the student, and I don't want you to talk to teachers up front because there's a clash. To your point, not all teachers want their students to be on phones, but the reality is 99% are on phones. 80% of students are on an iOS device, and they're learning on an iOS device. And so that was a pretty discrete cultural change that we had to put to make this product really successful. So I'm sure that answers your question. It's focusing on teachers, but being really good at that. But if you're going after a different segment, not being confused around who your customer is, because it's really easy to make mistakes.
So there was no mom or dad effort at all in this process, just the kids?
No mom and dad effort, because we knew if we cracked the code of making an engaging learning process, everything would solve itself. And yes, we have a lot of demand from high schools to bring to high schools. But the reality is, if students were going to share this, if they were going to pay for this themselves, and they're a very, very fickle audience. I mean, when I was saying that the only time I've been to the F1 was my first job was serving beers. It was either like serving beers and then drinking beer. And so that's the decision they're making every day in their subscriptions. And so we said, if we're going to be able to crack the student code, everything else would sort itself out. And so yes, that we do believe the parents are going to be an interesting channel because they have an ability to pay. But when we started this, trying to get product market fit, it was just the student.
One of the challenges today is hiring great teachers, just because of pay at entry level. Time and time again. And then a lot of the textbooks, including yours, are digital. A lot of the schools have gone that way. So is there a thought or a future of merging the two, merging this app to be able to accentuate the textbooks in order to maybe subsidize as the teachers learn how to teach, right? Those new ones.
Well, firstly, maybe a bit of a side. Teachers, it's hard to get teachers into districts, but they're a great, for other types of functions, a great way to poach teachers. So, for our customer success functions, they're incredible resources. Just selfishly, at McGraw Hill, we're a company of ex-teachers, and I definitely encourage you to think about that as a labor pool to get really good talent. They know how to handle difficult people. They know how to handle difficult clients. They're great in front of clients. But you're absolutely right. There's been a real shortage of teachers. It's a really challenging job. And so our role, what we feel as a company, is how do we make their lives easier? How do we augment and use technology so they don't have to spend so much hours grading work. They don't need to do so much work personalizing the work for every kid. They can use technology instead of that printed textbook, which, by the way, is a great product back in the day, works every time. It is never your problem if it goes wrong, right? But now when you have a digital product, you can start to give feedback to the teacher and make their lives a lot easier. So that's a big push for us. How do we take content and make our teachers much more efficient to ease the burden of their workload? And they have really high workloads, and they're very unappreciated in our society, which I'm sure you understand.
I think we've unearthed another brand innovators session of like the future of education. That'll be a whole two-day symposium, but we'll get there. Justin, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.